and we're going to show how music can deepen existing relationships, create new ones, or build bridges.
Welcome, everybody, to The Hopeful Majority. And as I say, every week we have fascinating guests and fascinating conversations. And today I have what I might call someone that might be an iconoclast, tries a bunch of different things, found their way into bridging, not necessarily wanting to be a bridge builder by heart, but someone that started off in the education policy world and is now started a nonprofit that focuses on how to use music as a way to bridge divides. We live in incredibly divided times. I think we need some water in our politics. We need to hear from people from different walks of life. And so today I want to introduce to you Shaka Mitchell, who is a senior fellow at the American Federation of Children, and importantly, both on the side and his day job and many other iterations, Shaka thinks a lot about how to bridge divides, whether it's in education policy or in broader society, utilizing his passion for music. And if you're wondering, what instrument does Shaka play? I have no idea. That's why you got to listen to the podcast. So let's hear from Shaka.
Manu, great to be with you.
Shaka, thank you so much for having the conversation. We were talking right before in the prep about the fact that you think bridge building might actually need to start earlier, as someone that has seen it in communities. Can you speak more to that?
Yeah, for sure. Well, again, thanks for having me on. Really excited to be with a fellow bridge builder. You've been doing a lot of this work for a while, and I really appreciate that. And when I think about the work that's happening around the country, because as you know, there are not just dozens, but hundreds of organizations that have engaged in bridge building, whether or not that's across socioeconomic lines or partisan lines, what have you, just trying to foster a healthier, dialogue in our communities. When I think about those organizations, I think sometimes they start a little too far downstream. And what I mean by that is, organizations sometimes put up a flyer or host an event and they say, we're going to have a town hall and we're inviting people to have civil dialogue, civil discussion about insert really fraught topic, the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, pro-life versus, pro-choice issues. Pick your topic. It doesn't really matter. But my thought is, oh, that's great. And I hope that those conversations are really fruitful and constructive and respectful. But my fear is that the types of folks who self-select to attend an event like that are actually not the ones that we really need to go after. I think the ones we need to go after, the people we need to go after, are the ones who say, well, I'm not going to get in a room with a bunch of those other people, right? Because they're nothing like me. I don't want to hear anything they have to say. And so my project, the Come Together Music Project, I really think of it as kind of a precursor to some of the other bridge building work, something that primes the pump a little bit so that people can engage with organizations about those deeper policy topics.
Yeah, it's really interesting how you talk about, the fact that we need to reach people that aren't already, at the watering hole, bridging evangelists. How do you actually reach the majority of people? And I think music is a really interesting cultural lever. But I'm just curious, before we go there, were you ever one of those people that didn't want to enter a conversation? And if you were, like, how did you navigate that personal journey?
Yeah, I mean, I have to think that we are all that person on the right issue, So there are definitely places and spaces where in the past, and even today, I'm sure if you pressed me, where I'd say, oh yeah, I don't really want to enter that sort of what feels like hostile territory, because maybe it's a deeply held belief, or maybe it's just something that for whatever reason is just so emotional, and I've had a bad experience with it in the past. That I just don't want to engage with that again, right? I mean,
if you'd be open, is there a particular topic for you personally that's really challenging, you find yourself having the hardest time bridging on or having a conversation about?
I think I'd be harder pressed to find that topic now, but that's probably as a result of spending a lot of time in these spaces and really, trying to be introspective. I do think, and this may run counter to what folks think, but when I became a parent, I think that I didn't even know that I had ideas about parenting that were strongly held. Before you have children, All of a sudden I had children and I've got 3 daughters. Then all of a sudden I realized, like, oh, I have some beliefs here. I actually have some beliefs about child rearing that are strongly held, right? Because we're trying to do the best we can for the people that we care the most about. And so when someone threatens that that way of being, I think it can really cause us to get tense and maybe even kind of push back aggressively. So, yeah, I would say there's probably been some parenting things that I've had to kind of release.
That's really interesting that as your life evolves, as you go through different life stages, and as someone that isn't, a parent, but maybe aspires to be one, it's interesting to think that, oh my God, I might have views when I have a kid that's out there in the world, right? And maybe my views, I don't know, pretend it's on the Second Amendment change, or pretend it's on, sexual violence, or whatever the case might be. I asked this question, Shaka, because you talk about wanting to reach people that don't naturally come to bridging. And in some ways, I actually think that's a lot of people, and oftentimes a lot of them have this concern. A lot of us have this concern. Well, I can't compromise or talk on that issue. So I'm curious what your advice would be to someone that has difficulty broaching certain topics because they're so close to their identity, and yet societally need to be addressed and have talked about.
Yeah, so I think that one of the first steps in the process of having a more constructive conversation and dialogue with someone, and not feeling the need to dig in, kind of ad nauseum to the things that we think we believe. And by the way, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have things that are strongly held.
Of
I have
course.
lots of beliefs that are very strongly held, but that doesn't mean you can't be in the same room with someone or in conversation with someone.
Why not?
Why not? Well, I think it starts with humanizing the other person.
Hmm.
So to me, two things are really important: humanizing the other person, appreciating that, oh, they're actually very much like me. They can have strongly held beliefs. I can have strongly held beliefs. We can coexist. We both have experiences that are feeding into that. The other thing that I think is really important is humility, and thinking, hey, you know what? I have strongly held beliefs. Let's take religion and faith. I have some very strongly held beliefs about, the how the world began and about people being made in the image of God. These are just things that I believe. Um, that being said, I think that our ideas are better when we hear folks who disagree, right? Because there's a humility in listening to folks and saying, "Oh, is there something like? Let me hear someone else say it back, and see if I continue to agree, continue to hold on to this belief." Right? There's a lot of hubris in saying, "You know what? I'm so right that I don't even need to. I'm not even going to listen to anyone. I'm not even going to let anyone approach me with another thought." I think it's much more productive and constructive to have a humble posture to say, sure, I'm willing to have the conversation, and maybe I'm going to be wrong. Now, it might turn out that I still believe the same thing at the end of the conversation as I did, at the beginning. But I think going in with that posture is really helpful and can be really disarming to the other people in the conversation.
Shaka, it's really interesting that you talk about how your ideas can actually improve with other people in the room, and yet there's also this challenge that some ideas feel so core to our identity, as you talked about, right? Let's say with parenting potentially, that it's difficult to get into that conversation, to get into that room. Do you find that things like music are able to actually transcend some of those real gaps that maybe you can't have necessarily just with a dialogue or a conversation?
Yeah, I really do. So now you're kind of getting to the heart of the issue, and I think that music does this for a number of reasons. But I won't try to list them all. We'll continue to talk about this. But one of the things that I think has really kind of uh, hindered our ability to have these conversations in the past 10 years is that most of us spend hours a day in this kind of instant gratification mode, staring into a small rectangle,
Hmm.
right? Where things are happening so quickly, and our attention spans are just like we're all a bunch of goldfish. And listen, I speak of which I know, right? So I'm not trying to put that on anybody, whatever. I can see my phone right now.
I'm one of the biggest goldfishes around, so you're fine.
Okay, so one of the things that music helps us do actually is to stop for an extended period of time and listen and just focus on the one thing, right? So when I do these sessions, and we can talk more about how they work, but what we do is we will sit and we will listen to music together. And I think that's really powerful. So I think it actually slows us down, right? It gets us out of this like constant, oh, I've got to check and see if things are updated. Oh, is there another like? Oh, is there another post? Whatever. No, we're saying, you know what? For the next, and it might not be a long time, for the next 45 seconds, 60 seconds, we're just going to stop. We're just going to listen. And then I'm going to hear you talk about why you just chose a certain song and how it resonates with you. And that act of listening, I think, goes a really, really long way.
So how does it how does the process begin? So you like tell us a little bit more about you get people in a room and you know does someone actually play live music? Is it people listening? Like could you walk through that process? I'm really
I sure can. Yeah. So the way that this started, I'll say, is that I live in Nashville. Nashville is Music City. There's just always kind of music around. There's always kind of a song in the air. We love it. Um, when COVID hit, I started getting together with some friends of mine. It's like four of us, and we started getting together monthly, mostly because we just missed the community. And we would get together at a friend's house. We'd sit in the driveway because this is the time when everything is distanced. And what we would do is ahead of time, we would send out 3 categories. Everybody then had to send in a song selection that matched that category. Then we'd get together. So we put them on a playlist. We'd get together, sit in the driveway, and we'd listen to them. Right. And so, that first time, one of the songs was a song that's a guilty pleasure. And that's when I found out that a lot of my middle-aged male friends were closet Swifties. Um, a song was like, "What's a song that you hate?" And that one was easy for me. It's Montel Jordan. This is how we do it. Always hated that song. Okay, so we start doing this, and we would listen to a song. Then whomever chose that song would explain why. Right. So it's part storytelling, it's part listening party. And I started to think, if we were a little more intentional about this, I think we could really do a lot. This is at the same time, of course, as you know, that political partisanship is increasing, right? Things are so divisive. You've got large swaths of the population that refuse to go home for family holidays because they don't want to engage in conversation around the Thanksgiving dinner table. So that's happening simultaneously. That's where Come Together Music Project kind of originated. So the way it worked is I might say, all right, Manu, why don't you be one of the guests, and then we're going to pick somebody totally, random, right? Someone else, maybe you know them, maybe you don't, and we're going to show how music can deepen existing relationships, create new ones, or build bridges. And so I would send you 3 prompts or questions ahead of time, and these prompts, the way that we do it is that they get increasingly vulnerable, and then you would send in your song selection. And so again, one of the a recent session that we did with I did it with the co-host of another podcast. Um, they are professors. These two women are professors, psychologists, and do a lot of really interesting work in the policy and political space. Their categories were: what's a song that reminds you of a best friend? Then, what's a song? They were all parents. They were both parents, as am I. Said, what's a song that might be your parenting theme song? And then the last one, because of some of the work they do, I said, all right, what's a song that you associate with protest? And then we talked about that, right? And every time there are songs that are just total surprises. And every time I do one of these sessions, you find that there are these conversations that I believe we never would have gotten to, but for music.
So what does success look like for you? Is it that at the end of this session, two people leave with a deeper understanding of, why they think about protest one way or the other? Or is it to sort of start a relationship? How do you think about success?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think about it in a few different ways. So many of the sessions that I've done so far have been in the virtual space, right? And so we're doing it, and it's really just the three of us, kind of in a setup like this. And in that case, I would say that
Virtual? like this? Yeah.
Yeah, some are virtual, but some are in person with a live audience. Um, I think that
Oh, what do you mean by a live audience? Like there's two people on stage doing it together?
yeah, yeah. So for instance, I did this at the Arizona State University College of Law,
Okay.
and my guests were an Arizona Supreme Court justice who's more conservative libertarian, and then an Arizona Court of Appeals judge who is more progressive.
So tell us about what happened between a libertarian judge and a liberal judge from Arizona.
Great. Okay, so these two men get in the room. By the way, they had actually never met. The Court of Appeals judge is the newest member of the court, was at the time. And so these two judges have never met one another. So they get in there. Their first question was, what's a song that reminds you of your hometown? And almost immediately, the justice shared a song. It's a Billy Joel song. It's called Allentown, and he's not from Allentown, Pennsylvania, but he's from a place that's nearby, very much working class. You could see him getting kind of emotional as he talked about this because um, it was just such a deep kind of well for him to tap into. He talked about the experience of growing up, looking out the window at the sanitation truck that would drive by, and how that was an aspirational job at the time because he never could have conceived of going to law school, etc. Now, this is a man who is, again, he's a Supreme Court justice. He's started a law firm, highly accomplished, person. You never would have thought that this was a kid whose a dad, I believe, was a welder. Um,
Mm,
very humble roots, right? So part of what it was doing, I think, for the audience was reminding the audience, hey, you actually don't know nearly as much as you think you do about either your friends or folks that you think are your ideological sort of enemies, right? This is a real person with a story that you never could have imagined. And so, by the way, so one of my hopes to your question is that when people, and there were law students in the room, there were lawyers, there were actually a couple other judges and just folks from the community in that room, if they see an opinion from this justice in the future, um, and maybe it's one that they disagree with, one, I hope that now they think, you know what, that guy is actually not a terrible person.
right.
He's someone who was really thoughtful, seems to care deeply about things. He just has a different, concept of jurisprudence, a different concept of constitutional law than I do. But by the way, I can't demonize him in the same way. And I think that's really constructive for us to be able to say that about folks with whom we disagree. That, hey, I might disagree, but that doesn't make you less than. And I'm not going to sort of dehumanize you.
So I'm curious as you talk about this lawyer and how the effect that had on the audience is that, hey, just because they have a different sense of jurisprudence doesn't mean they're a fundamentally evil person. I want to test this assumption a little bit. Let's test it a little bit. So they might have a different sense of jurisprudence, so they might not be an evil person. But let's say I'm someone that really deeply believes in abortion. At the end of the day, they're still taking away my right to choose. I listened to your song. I saw that there's some commonality, but they're taking away my right to choose. How do you square that with them still being a normal person that doesn't deserve to be dehumanized when they're dehumanizing me with their legal opinion?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I might point just from that same exercise that we did with the two judges to the last question that we did with them. So the last question in their series, we did 4 questions with them. I asked them for a song that they associate with justice, and
Hmm.
they both picked a song. They talked a little bit about why. One of the commonalities, actually, between these two is that they discussed the limits of the law and the limits of their own court opinions, even. And so, we were not talking specifically about the issue, about issues of life and issues of abortion, et cetera. But one of the things that did emerge is that they were actually very much on the same page when it came to feeling the weight of their decisions, and being really mindful of that when they're issuing these decisions, knowing that they affect real people, also knowing that regardless of what they write in an opinion, like they can't remedy all the things that are wrong with the world. And
Right.
I actually think that was really important for people in the room to hear. And it came from both justices. And I don't know that we could have gotten to that conversation otherwise. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So again, it's not right on point to say a specific issue, but some of that is just like, let's talk about the atmosphere in which these decisions are happening. Let's talk about the things that are presented to, in their case, judges. They're they are they are judges, appointed judges. They are not omnipotent or omniscient, actors who can right every social and societal ill. And so I think that was really important for both of them to say and kind of affirm.
Do you actually play the song on stage?
We do. We listen to some of the song. We listen to about 45 seconds.
45 seconds. So let's say I pick a song, we actually play it, then someone else has picked a song, they play it, and then you tackle a specific issue after that.
Um, Basically, so
Okay.
we go one at a time, right? Because,
Okay.
um, after the justice picked, Allentown, or, or for instance, when I did it with the two women who were the co-hosts of the We Made It Political podcast, asked them about parenting, and one of them picked, and this, by the way, for what it's worth, um, this woman is a white woman, you know, parent from Raleigh, North Carolina.
Hmm.
Okay, the song that was her parenting theme song was DMX "Party Up."
Wow. Yeah, which no one would have pegged.
Exact. No one. You cannot tell me that anyone, if I gave you 100 choices, 1,000 choices, that you would have picked that song, right?
Yeah.
It's excellent. There's always something that
Hmm.
surprises us about this, and I think music allows for that. Yeah, so we do one song at a time, discuss it, see what maybe it stirs up in the other person,
Yep.
and then sometimes open it up again if it's a live audience. Open it up to the audience a little bit to hear some of their reflections, and it's been super fun every time we do it.
Have you ever bridged a conversation or had a conversation with two different perspectives where it actually backfired and you didn't actually get the outcome that you were looking to achieve?
Man, knock on wood, you're causing me to really like rethink my whole approach here a little bit, but no, thankfully, no, it has not been that.
So who's showing up to these dialogues? Do you think that they're the people that are most likely to show up? Do you think that they are the extremes? Because I can hear a skeptic saying, "Well, this sounds interesting, but maybe it's just because Shaka's playing a bunch of music to a bunch of moderates." So how do you think about who's showing up?
Yeah, I don't have a great sense for that yet, but because we don't sort of poll the room and sort of see like, hey, who? Um, it's not like one of those debate shows where we come in and on the front end we say,
Yeah,
who, when you entered this room, when you started watching this podcast, which of you thought that Manu was going to be more handsome than Shaka? Which of you
sure,
thought Shaka
sure,
was going to be more
sure.
handsome than Manu? And then did your perception change?
By the way, we both are wearing glasses, so the real question should be who's more blind than the other.
That's right. I will vote for myself in that one.
Oh, I would vote for myself. Man, so we both would be equally self-deprecating.
There we go.
Maybe that's the type of attitude you need to be a bridger. Is that if you immediately default to self-deprecation, then you're more likely
It
to listen
works.
to other views.
It works. No, I think we have not had that negative experience yet. I will say, in 2026, I'm really excited to launch a series of live events here in Nashville in partnership with TEDx Nashville. And so
Interesting.
we'll be doing these monthly for folks. I expect that I think capacity in the space is something like 75, 80 people.
Nice.
And I have spoken with a professor at Johns Hopkins about doing some like pre and post surveys really quick, um, to see how the audience is reflecting on these things, to see are we moving the needle at all.
I think you should absolutely do that because, and I'm happy to help provide some data sets we use. I'm sure I don't know who the professor at Johns Hopkins is, but actually I might have an idea. But we've worked closely with a few other people to develop a metric system for like how do you actually measure pre and post impact? Because at scale, you're asking for millions of dollars to build a movement of people that are bridging divides, but if you aren't actually able to shift attitudes in certain ways, it can get complicated. So I've really encouraged that you do that. I'm curious. So here's why I deeply respect you is that this is not even your day job, right? So your day job is to be a senior fellow at the American Federation of Children, where you're thinking about education policy. And I think that the way we get out of this mess is to have more and more Americans that just deeply care about the issue, thinking about ways that they can bridge divides in their local communities. Because frankly, it doesn't take this is not rocket science. This just requires some passion, some interest in building a community. So why did you get like? Why are you spending your time doing this? And what's the point?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And what's the point? I mean, I'll say for folks who don't have a passion project, I would say you should find a passion project
Mm,
and hopefully work um, kind of enlivens you, whatever your vocation is. And I've been really fortunate to work in education, and it's something I care deeply about. And so that's where my career has been. I care about it. It's never been like a slog. That being said, in my day job at the American Federation for Children, we are working on education choice issues in the states and at the federal level. I've been in a lot of state legislatures and capitals,
mm.
spoken to many elected leaders over time, spoken to many parents over time, and I used to be a school administrator, charter school administrator. Um, Education, I think, I think a lot of people get into education policy, most people, because they want to do some good. And then all of a sudden it's like they really learn what that idiom means, like no good deed goes unpunished.
Mm,
That is education, right?
mm.
Teachers will tell you that, principals, elected officials, um, folks like me, policy advocates, or will tell you that, man, here I am. We just wanted to do some good things for kids, and it can be a really charged environment.
Is it because of interest groups? Is it because it's about the fact that you're trying to educate people's children, and so they have really strong views about that? I mean, especially in the last 10 years, the question of American history, the question of what books should be in schools, what type of bathroom should exist in a high school, for example. These are all issues that have become so relevant. Like, why is education so charged?
Yeah, I think I do believe that education is charged because it's something that is happening to the people that we care the most about, our children,
Hmm.
right? And so, um, that's a topic that parents rightly get animated about. Now, you combine that with what we know about today's news media and algorithms, and it means that all of a sudden people are seeing clips and footage from a totally dysfunctional school board meeting 1,500 miles away, right?
Hmm.
So it doesn't matter if the conversation in their community is much more maybe balanced or nuanced or peaceful and respectful. When you're
Sure.
seeing that, all of a sudden you start thinking like, oh my gosh, is that happening in my community? Could that be happening in my school? Right. And so I think those two things combined. um, I am not of the belief that education policy or has to be partisan, and I think I'm in a pretty small minority of folks who really believe that. But that's kind of my mantra, and
Why is that a small minority of people? Like, do a lot of people believe it should be partisan?
I think a lot of people think that the solutions are partisan, should be partisan.
Why is that?
Um, well, it's because you do have some pretty strong interests. I mean, now we're going to sort of talk like political science a little bit here, but
Sure.
at a time in the country when union membership is declining and has been for years, the largest and most powerful union in the country is the public school teachers union.
Hmm.
Um, that's a pretty large interest, right? At the same time, you've got lots of things happening at the federal level, whether it's with the Department of Education or in higher ed, that cause a lot of people to be really nervous about this institution that holds a lot of actual and psychological value in our lives. And so these are some pretty big ships to get turned. And I think that um, lots of people have kind of a nostalgia for a time that probably wasn't actually as good as they remember,
Mm.
and they fear innovation and fear change a little bit, particularly again when it involves our kids. So it can be really fraught, but I don't think it has to be.
I hear you. It's so interesting. Well, let's take education policy because one of the biggest critiques of bridging that I see is you have this conversation. You had, two Supreme Court people or one Supreme Court, one Court of Appeals guy on stage. They're having a conversation. So what? Right? Like, how does this conversation spill over to real impact? And I'm sure you, before really doing this work and as a passion project on your side, like you probably thought about that with some of the work that's happening in other spaces. So how do you think about that as someone whose job is to think about education policy as their vocation?
Yeah. Yeah. So when I think about education policy, or frankly, lots of other policies, right? I mean, we've discussed or kind of at least alluded to, any number of things. It could be Second Amendment, whatever. It could be environmental policy. It does, energy policy. It doesn't really matter. I think that lots of people don't even want to enter that conversation, and so I don't. I don't have the expectation that people are going to leave a come together music session and think, oh, you know what? That person just said that Led Zeppelin's Kashmir got them through a real low point in their lives. You know what?
Right.
I'm fully on board. Whatever they say, I'm
Yeah.
going to sign up.
By the way, I feel like by the end of doing your project, you're going to be like the expert in Spotify playlists to like bridge divides. Like you're going to have like the fact that you're pulling like Led Zeppelin's Cash, you're pulling this. I just imagine Shaka like having the encyclopedia of Spotify on how you bridge different issues.
It really is. My Spotify Wrapped.
You should actually do that. That could be interesting. Actually, like you create a playlist for a Thanksgiving family dinner. Like here's how. Anyway, sorry, keep going.
Well, yeah, it makes for a really, really like schizophrenic Spotify Wrapped at the end of the year.
Yeah, I bet. I bet Spotify is like, I can't tell what this guy
Yeah,
thinks.
we don't know what this guy's doing at all,
Yeah.
which is fair. But yeah, so I don't think that one person is going to look at another person's musical selections and think like, oh, okay, we are so simpatico, like that's my ride or die. That's not going to happen. What I hope it will do, though, is that it will now allow these two people to be in another room, to be in another setting, and actually have make more progress on a specific set of issues that also matter in the kind of local, state, or national dialogue, right? I mean, again, let's just take where we are. I don't know when this episode will publish, but as we record, we're still in the midst of what is now, I think, the second longest federal government shutdown in history,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Repeatedly, we've just heard, yeah, we don't even want to talk to the other side.
Right.
Okay. Well, that is not helpful. At some point, we're going to have a conversation. And so the question is, well, how do we get folks in the room with one
Mhm.
another? And what I can say is that music has been a part of every known civilization. There's a reason that people go to concerts together with perfect strangers, hundreds or thousands of perfect strangers. There's a reason that music is part of every faith community
Mhm.
and worship service, right? Music has just got it's such a bonding element that I think that it can do a lot of good to at least get people in the room together to say, all right, now can we be more constructive? By the way, um, because we're here and we spent some time with one another, it's actually much harder to hate you, right?
Mm.
When we just go retreat to our silos and say, I don't even want to meet with the other side. Well, um, it's much easier to again demonize and remain that anonymous person in the comments online. This is putting people together so that that anonymity is gone and now we're humans again.
Yeah, I mean Taylor Swift sold out, what, 150 cities with, 50 to 60,000 people in each city, all of whom with different views. I mean, I think she might be the first person in the history to unite the NFL crowd, with like Swifties. Like that's literally a bridging of cultural divides and people that like trucks and people that go to Kohl's. That's like a real thing, and that's crazy to think about. And I think you're right. My question is like, do you think live music would have a bigger impact, or do you think like do you think if you were to let's say be able to get a live band, right? Do you think live music or people actually playing together? When you actually initially talked about this, I thought you guys were actually playing music. I'm curious if live music would have a different effect.
Yeah, it's a great question. And being in Nashville, we actually have access to phenomenal musicians. Phenomenal.
Right. Yeah. You guys have like honky tonks in every corner where there's like some dude playing a guitar.
We do. We are really just so blessed to have just like musical riches beyond belief, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's why when people move from here, it, this was my experience. I actually had a really hard time when I moved away from Nashville and was attending a church in another city because
Hmm.
I was like, man, the music is just not great
Yeah. Yeah.
because you get so spoiled in Nashville. You can even just go into a church on Sundays and you're hearing like Grammy award winning recording artists. They just happen to be playing organ, um,
Yep.
at a church. But to your question, yeah, we're thinking about how to incorporate some live music. Again, it's challenging because you want people to be able to pick their songs, right? And you're basically now talking about needing an infinite kind of repository for live musicians to play. But I think there's some ways to do it. So definitely exploring that.
Well, I'll connect you with the Braver Angels Music Committee because they've done a lot of great work on how to think about music, and people that have listened to the show they know that organization quite well. And if you, by the way, if you're new to the show, you should check out my episode John Wood Jr., who is a national ambassador of Braver Angels. We actually talked about music a lot. So and Christian will put up the link right now for folks to check that out. But I think there's a lot of interesting elements to parse out. The question becomes like you're using music, not necessarily the actual music itself, but the act of picking a song is actually the bridging change agent, it sounds like, as opposed to just the act of playing music. That's right, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's also the act of picking it, but also expressing it. I do think
Yeah, it's that vulnerability. There's a
that's
vulnerability
exactly
to
the
it.
word I
Yeah.
was going to use. It's a vulnerability that is it's challenging to tap into. If you don't know someone, certainly. It's also
Hmm.
challenging to do when it's original to you. And what I mean by that is if you said to me, "Hey Shaka, why don't you write a song about your wife?" I'd be
Hmm.
like, "What? I can't write a song. That's
Hmm.
that's super intimidating. It's not going to be good. I wouldn't even try, honestly."
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
said, "Hey Shaka, what's a song that reminds you of your wife?" Now that I can do, right?
Oh, I
And by the
see.
way, that song might change. The song I pick might change a week from now or 3 months from now, depend upon kind of where we are and what's going on in our lives, whatever. But it allows us to tap into someone else's art form. I think as a way to get vulnerable. But I also think it's a safe distance because if I pick a song and you don't really like the song itself, even if you critique it, you're not critiquing my relationship with my wife. You're just saying that you don't care for, I would pick a Ben Folds song. That's what came to mind. You're just saying, "Oh, I don't really like that Ben Folds song." Well, that's cool. I didn't write it. Ben
Yeah.
Folds did. Talk to him. I'm telling you about the relationship with my wife. That's different. And so it's really interesting. There's both kind of a safety and a vulnerability.
The application of that is actually this point on you're attacking the song, not your wife, let's say, right, or yourself. There's a norm that our chapters use before every discussion, and that norm is called you attack the argument, not the person. And it's really interesting that you in some ways.
Kind of non-attribution. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And so as a result, you're not dehumanizing the person for their views on the Second Amendment. You're uh, critically analyzing and attacking their specific argument. Um, but it's fascinating because a lot of people are unable to, I think, bisect the choice of the music with who you are as a person. They're like, if you saw my playlist, by the way, you'd think I'm an idiot. And I honestly, in music, I'm pretty illiterate when it comes to that. There's like Indian music, Bollywood music, and then there's like rap. There's Lil Wayne. There's Blunt Blowing, followed right after by like Wildflowers. It's crazy, but it's really interesting to think through. So here's a final question I have for you. You're in the education world. What is an education policy topic or solution that you think most Americans could get behind?
Yeah. Can I give you two?
Please.
I'll give you two because I think most Americans will get behind these, and I think that they tend to divide on partisan lines, which is pretty goofy, right? So
Okay.
that's some of what we're trying to attack. Um, I think actually most Americans would get behind increasing teacher pay, right? That is typically thought of as kind of a more left-leaning democratic policy. I also think most Americans, especially parents, get behind school choice, letting parents decide where their kids go to school and having the dollars follow that child. That's typically thought of as something that's right-leaning, more Republican. I actually think majority of people get down with both of those. It's often like elected leaders who want to kind of make that those two things more partisan and sort of weaponize them. But I think we are closer together on that than we think.
Well, that's oftentimes the issue with a lot of policies is, and that's why we actually call this the hopeful majority. The idea is that you right now, if you're an elected official, there's no incentive or voting base that rewards you for fighting for school choice because it's a bipartisan issue. But there's a shit ton of special interest groups that will hammer you uh, on the extremes. And so the part of the thought is like, how do you actually activate this majority of Americans that share a lot of what you're talking about? So I deeply appreciate you coming on. I wish you'd provided a deeper answer, and I'll go back to this question. Unlike, you could pick a lot of passion projects.
Yeah.
So why this one?
Yeah. Okay. Let me see if I can do better this time. So I mean, I think again, we've got to gravitate towards what speaks to us. I started doing a
Yeah.
lot of work with a project called the Civil Society Fellowship out of the Aspen Institute, which I
Mhm.
was just really fortunate to get to be a part of this multi-year fellowship and have some great, I think, people who will be lifelong friends have come out of that. And when I was sharing, as I did with you, when I was sharing a little bit about what we used to call song swap, my friends from the Civil Society Fellowship, it's called our cohort is called Ain't No Mountain. So
Mm.
appropriately, it's musical. Where we named our cohort after a song, Ain't No Mountain High Enough. Um, they really encouraged me when I was telling them about a couple different ideas I was thinking about pursuing. They sort of said, that's the one. Like they could sort of see me, I think, liven up when I talked about music. It's something, even though I'm a fledgling musician at best, it's
Mm.
something that I do really care about. I really do think that music is what I might call like a common grace. I think it's something that anybody can.
Yeah. But why do you care about bridging divides?
Yeah, because maybe that is actually based on my education work, actually,
Mm.
right? I mean, I spent a lot of time thinking about how to make sure kids are as prepared as they can be for our country, right?
Mm.
I spent a lot of time doing that. I now think that we've got to make sure our country is prepared to welcome our kids. And
I agree.
so maybe it's that. I just, I've got kids of my own, and they need to enter a world that is willing to engage respectfully and constructively with ideas. That's a safer place to be, actually, than what we've got right now.
I couldn't agree more, and I appreciate you taking round two at that question because part of the ways in which I think we get more people engaged in this work is by explaining what actually draws us to it. And I think even getting to that purpose level, like someone might critique you for this idea, but they can, I think, relate to the impulse, Shaka, that Shaka has kids and he wants a country that's willing to welcome his kids. And I think we can all get behind assumptions and values like that. So I'm so grateful for you taking time to join the show. And I appreciate you thinking through the ways in which you can contribute to our society through something as interesting, simple, and elegant as Spotify.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for having me. And, I'd love to have you on at some point. Maybe we can do an event together because I really do think one, it's a super good time. At the very least, you make a new friend. You end up with a new playlist that you can listen to, whatever, in the car or while you're making dinner or something. But I do think that it unlocks this deeper connection for everybody that's in the room. And now there are songs that when I have the off chance to hear them at the grocery store, just walking around or whatever, so a car drives by and I hear it, I immediately think of these people that I've done these sessions with, and
Mm.
they're real people to me now, and that's I think that enriches us over time.
They are real people to you, and I think the folks listening to this show believe in that deeply. And for all the folks that are new to the show, I appreciate you joining, because the conversation that we just had with Shaka is a fascinating example of the ways in which there are people of all different vocations. I mean, if you've been with the show for a long time, you heard presidential candidates back in 24, and if you've been with the show more recently, you've heard authors and generals and fascinating citizens like Shaka that are thinking about ways in which they can engage. And if you're interested in more of these types of these conversations, every Monday, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your content, we're building this hopeful majority together, people. And most importantly, if you've got a bridging playlist, let us know. Let us know. I'll send it to Shaka. All right. Thank you, everybody.